What do you think people see when they look at you? Do they see strength, or do they see volatility? Do they see a person who can hold their ground in silence, or someone who crumbles in the storm of their own emotions? Respect is not given to those who can shout the loudest, nor to those who can display their anger like a badge of pride. Respect belongs to those who have mastered themselves. The truth is simple, yet brutal. The world does not respect chaos. It fears it, it avoids it, it dismisses it. And if you cannot command your own heart, your own impulses, your own storms within, you will forever remain a prisoner to them. We all want to be respected, but few are willing to do the work of becoming respectable. It is easy to demand respect, it is harder to earn it. But the path to respect begins not in how you treat others, but in how you govern yourself. Your emotions are powerful forces, but if you allow them to control you, they will enslave you. And if you cannot control yourself, why should anyone trust you with responsibility, with power, with leadership, with love? Respect is not built in moments of ease. It is built in the moments when you are tested, when everything inside you wants to explode, and yet you remain calm, precise, unmoved. That is where respect is born. People are often told that emotions are the purest reflection of who we are, that to express every single feeling without hesitation is a sign of authenticity. The modern culture of self-expression celebrates emotional outbursts as bravery, as though losing control somehow equates to being real. But authenticity without discipline is nothing more than chaos, dressed up as honesty. To say whatever you feel in the heat of the moment may feel liberating, but liberation at the cost of wisdom is not freedom, it is recklessness. There is a deep misconception that controlling emotions means becoming cold, robotic, or detached from humanity. This could not be further from the truth. Control is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. Just as a musician does not silence their instrument, but learns to play it with precision, so too must we learn to play the strings of our emotions, not let them create noise without melody. People who mistake control for suppression often confuse silence with weakness, but true silence at the right moment is power, just as restraint in the face of chaos is strength beyond words. The danger of this misconception lies in the way it glorifies emotional explosions. Society claps for the one who screams their truth without filter, who vents every wound in public, who displays their inner turbulence like a badge of courage. Yet rarely do we ask whether this courage creates respect or only spectacle. The loudest person in the room is often the weakest, for their volume masks the trembling inside. Those who cannot hold their anger become known for anger, not for wisdom. Those who collapse into tears at every hardship gain sympathy, but sympathy is not the same as respect. To be respected is to be trusted with responsibility, with stability, with influence. How can anyone trust you to lead if you cannot even lead yourself? Anger, jealousy, fear, pride, all of these are natural, but natural does not mean noble. Fire is natural, but without control, it burns houses instead of forging steel. The misconception is believing that the mere existence of emotion justifies its eruption. It does not. Philosophers and thinkers throughout history have understood this truth, even when society ignored it. Machiavelli wrote that a ruler must learn to appear merciful and humane, but reserve the power to act otherwise when survival demanded it. In this teaching lies an important lesson about emotions. You do not destroy your emotions, nor pretend they do not exist. You understand them. You conceal them when necessary. You reveal them when it benefits your purpose, and you never allow them to control your judgment. The misconception that emotions must always be broadcast ignores the reality that human beings are both rational and emotional creatures. Reason is the governor of passion, not its enemy. To live without reason is to be tossed like a leaf in the wind, a slave to every passing feeling. To live without emotion is to be hollow, cut off from the depth of life. The balance is in command, feeling deeply yet responding wisely. The world has mistaken command for denial, but they are not the same. Command does not erase the soldier, it directs him. This false idea that suppression and control are the same has ruined many people's perception of strength. When someone remains calm under pressure, others might whisper that they are cold, unemotional, or even uncaring. But what they are witnessing is not the absence of feeling, but the triumph of discipline. Imagine a general in battle. If he panics, if he screams at his soldiers and runs wildly across the field, he is certainly emotional, yet does that make him strong? No, it makes him dangerous to his own army. His ability to restrain his fear, to mask his panic, to think clearly even when chaos surrounds him, that is leadership. Emotional control in everyday life works the same way. You may be furious, but fury does not guide your actions. You may be terrified, but fear does not paralyze your decisions. You may be heartbroken, but grief does not drive you into destruction. Control is not suppression. It is maturity. Suppression is a cage. Control is command. Consider also how society's obsession with instant expression has weakened relationships. People justify cruelty, saying they were just being honest, as if honesty excuses recklessness. Honesty without timing, without kindness, without self-control, becomes a weapon. To lash out in anger at a loved one and later say, "I was only expressing myself," is no different than striking someone with a sword and claiming it was simply a gesture of authenticity. Relationships erode not because people feel too little, but because they feel too much without guidance. The misconception that emotions must always be unleashed has made people slaves to mood swings, prisoners to impulses, actors in endless drama. Respect cannot survive in such instability. Love cannot thrive in constant explosions. Friendships cannot endure when every conflict becomes a storm. To control emotions is not to kill them, but to protect what matters most from their destructive power. Another reason this misconception thrives is because weakness loves justification. It is easier to believe that outbursts are natural and therefore acceptable than it is to confront the discipline required to master them. People excuse their temper by calling it passion, excuse their jealousy by calling it care, excuse their recklessness by calling it honesty. But passion without aim is destruction. Care without balance is possession. Honesty without control is brutality. The greatest misconception of all is that self-control robs you of freedom, when in reality it is the only path to freedom. Without it, you are not free. You are chained to every impulse, dragged wherever your emotions decide to take you. How can you call yourself free if anger can ruin your day, envy can poison your relationships, or sadness can paralyze your will? Control does not take freedom from you. It gives it back. The misconception surrounding emotions also blinds people to the power of timing. An emotion released at the wrong time can ruin opportunities, destroy trust, and shatter reputations. But an emotion released at the right time can inspire nations, heal relationships, and change lives. Anger, when controlled and directed, becomes justice. Grief, when shared wisely, becomes compassion. Joy, when expressed sincerely, becomes inspiration. Respect is born not from how much you feel, but from how wisely you reveal those feelings. Yet society teaches that every moment of anger must be posted, every spark of frustration must be broadcast, every drop of sadness must be displayed. This endless exhibition of raw emotion might create attention, but attention is not respect. Attention fades, respect endures. The misconception is choosing the temporary satisfaction of release over the eternal dignity of restraint. And so the conflict grows. On one side, a culture that celebrates emotional display as courage, and on the other, the timeless truth that self-control is the foundation of strength. The misconception thrives because the path of control is difficult, requiring patience, reflection, and discipline, while the path of indulgence is easy, requiring nothing but surrender. But what is easy does not earn respect, and what is difficult is often what defines greatness. People mistake control for suppression, silence for weakness, restraint for cowardice. But in reality, these are the qualities that separate the respected from the forgotten. The misconception is dangerous because it deceives the weak into believing they are strong, while only those who master their emotions will ever command the respect of others. Think back to the first time you lost your temper. The memory is sharp, isn't it? You remember the heat rising in your chest, the tremble in your voice, the rush of words escaping faster than thought. In that moment it felt powerful. You felt alive, as though the world would finally recognize the weight of your pain. But then the silence came. The look on their face, the damage in their eyes. The realization that the explosion did not build you up, It diminished you. The words that felt like weapons of truth became chains of regret. This is the paradox of emotional indulgence. It feels like strength in the moment, but afterward, it always feels like weakness. You replay the moment in your head, and with each replay the power fades, leaving only shame. And you know, deep down, that you are not respected for your honesty. You are pitied for your lack of control. Respect never grows in the soil of chaos, only in the soil of discipline. Yet so often we confuse the one for the other and mistake our collapse for a kind of victory. Now recall the opposite kind of memory. A moment where someone provoked you, where your insides screamed for release but you chose silence. Perhaps they insulted you, waiting for you to bite back, but instead you stood still, unshaken. Perhaps your heart wanted to shout, but your mind held the reins, and you spoke calmly, measured, with clarity. Outwardly it may have seemed uneventful, but inwardly it was a war you won. That moment you walked away taller, stronger, untouched. The respect that followed was subtle, but it was there. People notice when someone remains unmoved in the face of provocation. They notice the quiet power of restraint. That is the paradox reversed. What feels like weakness in the moment, silence, composure, patience, later reveals itself as the strongest decision you could have made, and you carry that strength forward like a hidden weapon no one can take from you, because you prove to yourself that you are not a prisoner of your own emotions. Yet so many live chained to emotional volatility, as though it were their identity. They say, "This is just who I am. I speak my mind. I show how I feel." But beneath that statement often lies insecurity. To erupt at every inconvenience, to sulk at every rejection, to envy every success. Is this really identity? Or is it a lack of identity? Think of those who cannot bear a slight word against them. They lash out because they believe dignity is preserved by noise, when in truth, dignity is preserved by composure. Think of those who cannot accept loss. They spiral, convinced their sorrow makes them deep, when in truth it only shows they are consumed. Emotional indulgence is often disguised as authenticity, but it is not authentic to be a puppet pulled by every string of feeling. The authentic self is not found in surrender, but in sovereignty, and when sovereignty is missing, relationships, careers, and reputations all collapse under the weight of uncontrolled emotions that were once mistaken for self-expression. Personal transformation often begins with a single painful realization. You are the cause of your own disrespect. Many come to this truth after ruining something precious. The friend who stopped answering your calls after one too many angry outbursts. The partner who left because your jealousy became suffocating. The opportunity that slipped through your hands because you could not keep your composure in the meeting room. In each case, the world seemed cruel, unfair, unsympathetic. But after the anger cools, after the self-pity dries up, the truth pierces through. It was not fate, nor bad luck, nor betrayal, it was your lack of control. And when that realization lands, it can feel like the collapse of an entire world. Yet it is also the beginning of transformation. For once you see clearly that you are both prisoner and jailer, the possibility of freedom is revealed. The respect you seek will not come from others until you earn it from yourself. And earning it begins with commanding the storms that have ruled you for too long. We see this lack of control everywhere in society, and it is both tragic and predictable. Scroll through the endless outrage online and you will find millions who cannot govern a single emotion but believe they deserve influence, power, or recognition. Their lives become theater, their emotions performances, their identities tied not to discipline but to display. Yet look closely, and you will see how hollow it is. The people who scream the loudest are rarely heard. The ones who beg for validation by exposing every wound are rarely healed. Society may reward them with attention, but attention is not the same as respect. Respect does not follow drama, it follows stability. No one admires the sailor who panics in the storm. They admire the one who grips the wheel, silent, focused, while the waves crash. This truth applies not only to leaders, but to every human life. If your emotions govern you, you will always live on unstable ground, never trusted, never respected, never free. Transformation is never instant. It begins in the small, ordinary battles no one else sees. The argument where you choose to walk away rather than escalate. The insult you answer with a calm sentence instead of fury. The moment you let someone's rudeness pass through you without piercing your dignity. These are the victories that build the fortress of respect, brick by brick. At first, they feel insignificant, almost hollow, as though you are losing by not reacting, but over time, they accumulate. People begin to notice, without you even realizing it, that you do not bend easily. They come to trust your presence, not because you shout, but because you do not shake. And in the quiet of your own reflection, you realize the truth. You no longer respect yourself for how loudly you can express emotion, but for how deeply you can contain it. The transformation begins invisible, but it becomes unshakable. This transformation is not without pain, because every time you hold back, every time you resist, you feel the fire burning inside you, begging for release. But this pain is not weakness, it is the mark of growth. A tree does not strengthen without the resistance of wind. Muscles do not grow without the resistance of weight. Likewise, your soul does not mature without the resistance of emotion. Every temptation to explode is a test, and every victory of restraint adds weight to your character. Over time, you realize something extraordinary. You no longer need to react. You no longer crave the satisfaction of immediate release. You no longer see emotions as enemies or masters. They become your allies, your messengers, your instruments. And when people look at you, they do not see suppression. They see depth. They see steadiness. They see someone who has walked through fire and did not burn. That is the transformation that makes respect not something you chase, but something that is drawn to you, naturally, silently, inevitably. There is a kind of power that cannot be measured by volume, wealth, or applause. It is the power of presence, the quiet authority of someone who has conquered themselves. You have seen it before, though perhaps you did not fully recognize it. It is the person who walks into a room and immediately shifts the atmosphere, not by speaking loudly, not by demanding attention, but by the weight of their composure. They do not tremble when provoked. They do not rush to defend themselves against every slight. They do not bleed emotion at every touch. Their strength is invisible, yet undeniable, because it rests on the foundation of self-mastery. While others scramble to prove themselves, this kind of person needs no proof. They have already proven everything within themselves in battles no one else has seen, in wars fought in silence. This is the awakening of inner strength, the realization that control is not a cage, but a crown. It is often said that scars are signs of pain, but in truth they are symbols of survival. To awaken inner strength is to look at your scars and no longer see weakness or shame, but evidence that you endured what once threatened to destroy you. The person who hides their scars still lives in fear, still tied to the emotions that created those wounds. But the one who wears them without apology has reached a higher state of freedom. They are not defined by the injury nor enslaved by the memory. They are defined by their endurance, by their capacity to feel and yet not collapse. The awakening comes when you realize that every storm you endured was shaping you, not breaking you. The storms carved depth into your soul, depth that shallow waters can never understand. In silence, in solitude, in the moments when you faced despair and chose not to surrender, you forged the kind of inner power that cannot be taught, only earned. This awakening does not happen in comfort. It does not arrive when the sun is shining and the road is smooth. It is born in darkness, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. When you are tempted to give in to rage, despair, or self-pity, and instead you choose to remain still. Imagine sitting alone, your mind filled with chaos, yet you do not run from it. You breathe, you endure, you let the storm rage while you stand, unshaken. That is the training ground of inner strength. In those moments you begin to understand that silence is not emptiness, but fullness. It is not weakness, but clarity. And when you emerge from that solitude, you carry with you a calmness that others feel even before you speak. It is the calmness of one who has seen their own chaos and survived it, who has looked into the abyss and returned with fire in their eyes instead of fear in their heart. The awakening of inner strength is not about becoming untouchable or unfeeling. It is about becoming unbreakable. Emotions still come, pain still visits, loss still arrives, but they no longer define you. You allow them to flow through you without drowning in them. This is where true respect is born, not from perfection, but from resilience. People respect those who remain steady while the world collapses around them. They respect those who can bear weight without complaint, who can absorb pain without turning it into poison for others. This strength does not parade itself. It does not need recognition. Its very existence commands recognition. You cannot fake it because it is written in the way you move, the way you pause before speaking, the way you refuse to be provoked by the meaningless noise that consumes most people. It is strength rooted in stillness, not spectacle. Think of solitude, of the times you felt utterly alone, when no one was there to console you or carry your burden. At first, solitude feels like a punishment, like abandonment. But over time, if you embrace it, you begin to realize it is a gift. In solitude, you meet yourself without distraction. In solitude, you hear the whispers of your own soul, whispers drowned out by the noise of the world. And if you learn to sit with those whispers long enough, they turn into clarity, into guidance, into strength. The awakening of inner strength often happens here, in the moments when you stop reaching outward for validation and begin reaching inward for truth. You realize that the respect you sought from others was always secondary to the respect you must demand from yourself. And when you reach that point, you are no longer alone, even in solitude, because you have become your own anchor. There is something unshakable about a person who no longer needs to prove themselves. They are not obsessed with being liked because they know their worth. They are not terrified of being misunderstood because they have made peace with misunderstanding. They are not desperate for respect because they embody the qualities that naturally draw it. This is the paradox of inner strength. The less you chase it, the more it grows. You do not need to shout because your silence speaks. You do not need to display power because your restraint is power. You do not need to be feared because your presence already carries weight. The awakening comes when you finally understand that the world is not your battlefield, your own heart is. And once you conquer that battlefield, the world bows to the gravity of your stillness. Inner strength does not make you invincible. It makes you eternal. It ensures that no matter what storms come, no matter what betrayals cut you, no matter what losses scar you, you will not vanish. You remain grounded, steady, unbroken. That is why respect gravitates towards such people, because others sense in them a kind of permanence, a solidity that is rare in a world addicted to fragility. To awaken inner strength is to realize you are no longer tossed by every wave of emotion, nor shattered by every passing storm. You have become the mountain, not the wind. The scars on your soul are no longer marks of defeat, but inscriptions of resilience, carved deep to remind you of what you survived. And in carrying them quietly, unapologetically, you awaken to the truth. The greatest strength is not to command others, but to command yourself. Respect cannot be demanded, it cannot be begged for, and it cannot be stolen. It is something that naturally gravitates toward those who embody steadiness and control. When you realize that emotions are not enemies but instruments, that life is not about silencing others but silencing your own chaos, you begin to see the true revolution. The world teaches us to fight outward wars, to conquer positions, wealth, status, and attention. But what good is it to conquer the world if your own soul is in pieces? What good is power if you tremble at your own anger, if sadness rules your decisions, if pride blinds your vision? The silent revolution begins when you turn away from chasing external validation and instead stand face to face with yourself. It is there, in that confrontation, that the seeds of transformation are planted, and though no one may see it at first, everyone will eventually feel it, because inner peace radiates louder than any speech, and inner strength lasts longer than any applause. There is a stillness in true strength that unsettles those who have not yet found it. People will wonder why you do not react, why you do not rush, why you do not rise and fall with the tides of drama that consume everyone else. Some will misinterpret your silence as indifference, others will mistake your composure for weakness, but over time, the truth will surface. People always recognize authenticity, even if it takes them time. They will realize that your steadiness is not emptiness, but fullness, not numbness, but clarity. And slowly, without you asking, respect begins to gather around you. It is not given because you demanded it, but because you proved you did not need it. In a world where everyone is desperate to be seen, you stand unshaken, content in your own presence. That kind of strength cannot be ignored. It commands attention by refusing to chase it. When you master yourself, life changes in ways you never expected. Situations that once provoked anger no longer disturb you. Words that once cut deep now pass through you like wind. Failures that once shattered your self-worth now become lessons. Nothing more, nothing less. This is not because the world has become easier, but because you have become stronger. The silent revolution is not about changing the outside world to suit your emotions. It is about changing yourself so that no matter what the world throws at you, you remain whole. Imagine being unbothered by insults, unshaken by rejection, unbroken by loss. Not because you are numb, but because you have trained yourself to remain grounded no matter what storm comes. That is not suppression. It is liberation. It is the freedom of no longer being ruled by the temporary and the trivial. It is the sovereignty of a soul that has declared independence from its own chaos. The beauty of this inner transformation is that it requires no audience, no applause, and no permission. It happens in silence, in the privacy of your own thoughts, in the quiet victories that no one else sees. Each time you choose restraint over eruption, patience over impulse, clarity over confusion, you add another brick to the fortress of your character. The world may not notice immediately, but the fortress rises nonetheless. And when life inevitably tests you, when storms rage and chaos surrounds you, the strength you built in silence becomes visible. People will look at you and wonder how you remain steady when everything is collapsing. They will see that while others bend, break, or flee, you endure. And that endurance is what earns respect, not because you asked for it, but because it cannot be denied. True revolutions are not shouted from rooftops. They are lived quietly until the world has no choice but to notice. This revolution is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about becoming unshakable. Emotions will still come. Anger, fear, grief, joy. But they will no longer own you. You will feel them, acknowledge them, and decide what to do with them instead of reacting blindly. This is what makes you powerful. Power is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to direct it. A river without banks floods and destroys, but a river with boundaries nourishes life. Your emotions are the same. Once you create boundaries within yourself, they no longer drown you, they empower you. People respect those who can hold fire without burning, who can carry grief without drowning, who can taste joy without becoming intoxicated. This balance is rare, and rarity is always respected. When you achieve it, you no longer seek validation outside because the revolution within has already validated you. In the end, respect is not about others at all. It begins and ends with you. The revolution is realizing that the greatest battle you will ever fight is the one within your own soul, and the greatest victory is not to conquer others, but to conquer yourself. Outward wars end, outward victories fade, outward applause dies, but the strength you build inside remains. When you silence the storms within, the world can no longer shake you. When you respect yourself enough to master your emotions, others have no choice but to follow. That is the revolution worth living for, not the loud fight for validation, but the quiet, lifelong mastery of self. And when you reach it, you realize something profound. The respect you once chased was always waiting for you, hidden inside, behind the walls of discipline, patience, and silence.